Mate, we are so excited that you are heading back down under for this tour. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how you're feeling about heading back to Australia.
I mean, I've missed it, honestly. I always joke I do some of my best thinking in Australia. It's like it's just a part of the world that I love to spend time and to play shows. And you know, obviously the last few years have made it difficult to get back, but I'm super eager to be there and to finally play for some people and play some new music and get to kind of walk down memory lane and play some of these songs that kind of helped build me up over the years.
You seem to have such a great love affair with Australia, and it's like a two-way love affair. We know that you love the country, but we know that there's also a lot of our listeners who are totally in love with you and your music. What's that love affair been like with Australia over the years, and were you aware of it in the early days?
Well, I think my first trip to Australia was a really pivotal moment actually in sort of my life and my career. We were sort of honored with this set of dates as something corporate to go play opening up for the Offspring. And I think for us growing up in Orange County, California, like getting to go out and support these legends, it was the first time we'd ever been. And inevitably, it was actually on that trip that we kind of decided to take a hiatus, and I went off to kind of work and build the Jack's Mannequin project, and Josh was working on his side project, and but for me, it held this like really important space. Being there allowed me this sort of freedom to think clearly, and so going back year after year, subsequently, obviously with Jack's Mannequin, and then eventually with the Wilderness, I think I've always carried that in my heart going back. That this is a place where I feel so open, and the audiences give me that vibe that they're there to they're there for it. They want it. They want that experience. So. Yeah, I do feel it when I'm there, and I missed it. And the last trip we were out there in 2018 was really beautiful, and I'm really eager to get to do it again and do it in this very sort of personal way.
What is it that you think about Australia that makes you feel so open when you're here and gives you that space to think? Is it the environment? Is it the people? What do you think it is?
I think it's a little bit everything. I think one, just the distance from home. I think there's something powerful about really being on the other side of the world, right? And opposite time zones, and just everything is just sort of upside down for me when I travel that far from home. That it sort of shocks me into just another way of being. I also think that there's like kind of a bit of an analog between Australia and California, where I'm from, right? I think there's a similar sensibility, but I think there's a little more of like a freedom, and maybe I'm painting with a broad brush here, but I always have felt like there's an openness to the people I've met and spent time with in Australia, and a little bit more of a laid back kind of approach to living that does feel similar to where I come from, but is just like another step in the right direction in my mind.
A lot of Aussies say that when they go to California as well, that California feels more like Australia than, say, the UK, which everyone always associates the UK and Australia together, but a lot of people say that California and Australia have that relationship where they're so similar. So you've found that as well over the years.
It's just something intuitively for me that as somebody who I wasn't born in California. I was born on the East Coast of the U.S. And sort of made a journey through my youth from the East Coast to the Midwest and eventually to the West Coast. And so for me, arriving in California when I was about eighth grade, freshman year of high school, that it felt like this coming home for me, right? And so I think when I went to Australia for the first time in my early 20s, when I was also like in a very pivotal moment in my life, there was again this sense of returning to something, even though I'd never been before. It was like a returning to myself, like a place that made me feel, that made me feel in touch with some of the deeper parts of myself that made it possible for me to make moves that had been really tricky. I think something in corporate. They were my dearest friends in a high school band, and the fact that we were able to sort of very peacefully come to this conclusion on that trip so many years ago, I think speaks volumes to the space that I feel like was opened up for me by venturing out there.
Definitely. Could you ever see yourself coming to Australia to work on an album, or like to write an album at least?
I mean, I would love to do that. Are you kidding? I mean, amazing. Especially now, too, because surfing's become such a big part of my life back home, and I really took to it a lot later in life, just knowing the quality of the waves that you guys have over there, I think would make it put it pretty high on my list of places to spend some time.
So I guess you've partly answered my next question. My next question was going to be, what do you like doing away from the stage when you're in Australia, and what are you hoping to do while you're here this time? But it sounds like surfing might be high on that list.
Well, it's funny. I was actually, because it's such a short trip for me. I mean, I basically get in the day before the day before the shows, play 3 shows, and then have to fly right home for my daughter's birthday. So I have one day off, which is going to be at the end of like a 33-hour travel day. But I was looking up. I mean, my first day is in Brisbane, and I was kind of poking around online yesterday, and it seems like there's a handful of pretty quality waves in that general vicinity. So I was maybe going to put out a little bat signal and see if anybody had a board and wanted to take a fairly mediocre surfer out and protect me in the water from the locals.
Now let's talk about your set list, because you've got such an amazing career of music behind you. How do you go about picking a set list for when you come to a country like Australia?
Well, look, I think I always approach the set from two angles, but largely as a fan, right? Like I want, the idea of I make records for a living, right? And then I play shows, and when you play a show, you want people to leave feeling satisfied, right? I was never one of these guys that was like, oh yeah, I'm so psyched that the band played nothing but deep cuts and I didn't hear any of the hits, right? So I think I go into a set saying like, well, what are the tent posts? Like, what are the moments from my bands and my albums over the years that, when placed into the set, people are going to feel like they made contact with, what may very well have been the first music they heard from me, and in that sense, when we discover bands, those early records, they really are seminal, right? They are attached to memories and nostalgia that you can't unwind or rebuild for people later in life sometimes. So I think there's a real emphasis on making sure that there are songs from all of the projects that keep and that is threaded through the whole evening, right? And that people feel like they get to sort of relive and make new memories to these songs that have meant a lot to them. And then, of course, you want to build in moments that are maybe they are deeper cuts, or they're songs that have meant a lot to fans but aren't like the first ones you read about, or like they're not in your Spotify top 20 or whatever. And new music, obviously I have a new record, I want to play a couple of new songs and point an arrow where I'm heading. And the goal is really, I think, especially in these solo shows, is you put it all on one stage, and if it goes well and goes right, I think people see sort of the accumulation of all of these years and what it means and sort of where I come from and where I've been and where I'm going, and hopefully it feels like a good movie and you go home feeling satisfied.
Definitely. I want to ask you about your new album in just a moment, but I wanted to read to you a message we got on social media from one of our listeners the other day, which I thought was absolutely fantastic after we announced your tour. This is from a little girl called Kelly, a teenager, I should say, not a little girl, a teenager. And she said, I recently discovered One Tree Hill and want to know if Andrew will do any of the Jack's Mannequin songs from One Tree Hill because my friends and I love that show.
Yes, the answer is yes. I mean, it's kind of like a miraculous thing, that show, that it's the gift that keeps on giving, and I feel like that's just true of television in general. You know, when you get lumped in with these sort of pop culture zeitgeist moments, people keep finding you. And One Tree Hill kind of popped up at a time when everything in transit, the first Jack's Mannequin record, had been out for at that point, close to a year, and I was very much in the early stages of recovering from a stem cell transplant from having leukemia, and they asked me if I would actually be on the TV show, and then they put out one of my songs as a single for the show and put the star in the video. I mean, it was a really wild deal. But to this day, I have so many people who are like, I first heard of you on One Tree Hill. And yes, that record, I think, everything in transit is I'm so close to that music still. It really was, such a pivotal time in my life, and there's a lot bound up in it, and I still very much love playing those songs. So yes, Kelly, I'll definitely throw some Everything in Transit tunes into the set list for sure.
Awesome. Did you ever do any of the One Tree Hill tours? Because I had Tyler Hilton on my show once, and he said he feared for his life on those tours.
I never did a full tour, but I did one or two performances with Tyler, like in outdoor shopping malls in California. And yes, those kids were absolutely rabid and hysterical, and I didn't fear for my life, but I'm not nearly as handsome as Tyler is, so I can understand why he was especially scared, because he drew quite a bit of attention anywhere he went.
Yeah, Andrew, I just wanted to ask two quick questions before we go, because I know we're running out of time. Sure. Very quickly. First of all, as a fellow cancer survivor, how is your foundation going? And second of all, your new album, how are those tracks going live?
So the Dear Jack Foundation is been thriving. It's crazy. I mean, obviously it was a tough time for any nonprofit to navigate during COVID, but we came through it really, really successfully, and I'm glad that we were able to retain our whole staff, and we're back to full program involvement now. All of our programs are filled and at full capacity, and it's really great work. I'm glad to hear that you're doing well and you're on the other side of your cancer too. And I reckon you probably were a young man like I was when I got sick, and that's really what we focus on at Dear Jack, is just trying to help young people navigate the cancer experience that often the system doesn't do a wonderful job of helping them do, outside of obviously the medical interventions. So that's been good. And then as far as the new music, I mean, we've really only had the chance to do two of the songs that have made their way out into the world so far, because we just as I left for the tour with Dashboard this summer, we had just put Stars out, and then we learned Skywriting shortly after that. So they went great. It's been super fun. The Stars was an amazing moment in this set this summer, and I'm really eager to sort of see where they lead us in the rest of the year, because it's going to be a busy year with a lot of time spent on the road.
Definitely. Well, Andrew, you've been so generous with your time this morning, but to finish off, what would you like to say to your fans out there before they go out and grab tickets to your shows?
Bring a friend, and I think the big thing is just come with an open heart. I think there's there's so many reasons to be sort of like locked up and in some sort of a corner these days. days, whether it be politics or just all, with feeling like you're inundated with bad news. And my whole mission at these shows is really to like have a beautiful, hold a beautiful space where people can sing and feel connected to the audience, and where we can feel connected to each other, and I'm really eager to do that. I think the solo environment is a beautiful space for that. So I hope to see you out there.